Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Toward a Quality of Life, coming at you from the Roxbury studio of BNN TV, your local Boston television station. We're here on a Monday afternoon, January 30th. The temperatures this month have been uncharacteristically warm. It's very enjoyable to go outside and feel a spring-likeness in the air. However, environmentally, it's the big warning of the global warming that is going on, also global freezing, all kinds of atmospheric anomalies that are leading to our demise. And the people who are students of this, scientists, etc., around the world, many of them, the vast majority of them, the overwhelming majority of them, talk about what disaster is coming to befall us as the environment heats up too much, cools down too much, and has many kinds of irregularities caused by things that we do as human beings to cause the natural environment to be irregular from patterns that we have known in recent times. In fact, there's a little debate going on right now in the space agency, NASA, about a very eminent scientist who's an expert in climate change, having arguments with NASA and being muzzled as to being able to speak about his cry and his alarm or his directive as to what kind of changes must be put into place immediately, especially to reduce carbon dioxide emissions in order to try to stall the trend that is happening before our very eyes. You can hear scientists from all over the world complaining of their being muzzled, and they're certainly not being given top attention because, of course, were they to be put on television, on datelines, on the news, as primary big news stories, which they really are, this would cause a lot of questions and problems for the industries that end up causing carbon dioxide emissions to go into the atmosphere the way they do. So these things stay on the sidelines. And also we know that this administration, the George Bush administration, has been particularly active and forceful in causing reports and people to be muzzled and put to sleep, so to speak, quiet on the issues of where our atmosphere and our globe is going in terms of climate change. They actually rewrite lines that scientists have written on reports in order to make them sound less alarming or less necessary for us to have to reverse and stall the change against fossil fuels and other kinds of industry that cause problem emissions to go into the atmosphere. There are also things like, there are so many things causing problems with the atmosphere, not just the emissions. Of course, they cause problems to our breathing as well. But there are also problems like the number of airplanes flying in the air and causing irregularities with the jet stream and wind tunnels and various kinds of disturbances to the air flow and air composition and natural way of being in the atmosphere. So again, nice today, temperature-wise, in the middle of January, which should be an extremely cold month, relatively speaking, for us in New England, and we have had many very warm days. And as you may have heard, recent years, coming up to 2006, have been beating the records in terms of how warm the days were for the year around the world, as a matter of fact. So the temperature continues to climb month by month, year by year, on the average and in the absolute. It's also going to more extremes, as I said, in terms of how cold it can get, how windy it can get, how many hurricanes we can have, of what intensity. etc., etc., etc. So good news, bad news. Good news in the short run for us to enjoy, bad news in the very soon-to-come run of what is happening to us as a world and as a planet. So, and while I'm on the subject of environment, I would also like to bring up, we always like to say a few words for the animals. And oh, by the way, I should be saying at the very beginning of this show that we have a new format, relatively speaking, and this is a call-in show. So perhaps we're going to put up the phone number right now for you to call in, and I'm hoping that you will call in. Please do. You're free to talk about anything and everything you may wish to talk about, make a comment, ask a question. I'm going to be touching on a few subjects, and as I talk, if something comes to your mind of your own or in response to what I'm saying, please call. We're very easy to talk to. We won't bite anyone's head off, and we'll be waiting for your calls. Hopefully you can do that and save me from speaking so much over the course of this next 50 minutes or so. So, back to the animals. We always like to put in a word for animals. And recently, I heard the sad reality that on Cape Cod in the last month or so, there have been 26 instances of strandings of dolphins, many of which have died. Again, there's a song by Bob Dylan that goes, "There's something happening here, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones?" Or to quote many a song from Neil Young, "Are you ready for the country? Because it's time to go, and this old world keeps spinning around. It's a wonder tall trees ain't laying down. There comes a time." So we are in environmental disaster. We are in crisis. You're not going to hear it on your television sets. You're not going to hear it on the radio. One of our favorites, President Clinton, as flawed and as human as he is, recently spoke in Davos, Switzerland, in the major economic conference of world leaders, very heavy-duty capitalist holders of economies around the world and influencers. Recently spoke and apparently had as the theme of his speech that climate change is the most important and difficult and horrible problem facing people right now. So he's giving his voice to it as well. We should all be aware. We should all be aware what a nasty and awful fate is befalling us as we lull around and are apathetic to these irregularities in weather. So the dolphins are stranding. One time we did a show called Brutal Sound Under the Sea, which was about the sonar use, the use of really low decibel, extremely loud, intense sonar under the ocean, and how this causes the life that lives in the ocean to be disturbed, to even have its brains implode, to hemorrhage from inside the brain, to disorient as to which way they should go, not be able to hear the true signals that they follow in the deep to know where to travel, etc., etc. So some of this could be from this sonar, which is prevalent all over the ocean now. It's especially being used by the United States Navy. It's being mostly tested as a weapon of destruction, a weapon of war, a weapon of lethality. So that could be a reason. It could also be sicknesses in the ocean, all the garbage being dumped by the cruise ships and other vessels on the ocean, cargo ships, etc. It could all radioactivity in the ocean. Who knows for what reason? Temperature shifts in the ocean, new kinds of currents, new kinds of temperatures to the currents, and where they are in the ocean. Many things could be responsible, and it's too bad that we have to think about studying it all the time when we should be just commonsensically alerted and aware that this is shocking and means that we're doing something wrong. We know many things that we are doing wrong, and we ought to go right to where we do things wrong, instead of constantly needing to look and look and look and sort of be ignorant or dumb on why these things are happening. Certainly not having avenues to talk about them in the public media in any kind of significant way. Then you read, just to cite another animal problem, and there are so many. Animals are having problems all over the place, and we love animals. You read about manatees getting cut up by the propellers of boats in the waters, the shallow waters they travel in Florida and elsewhere, and also swallowing plastics and getting cut by sharp objects that they swallow when they're just gulping for food. All kinds of sickening realities. And I wish if anyone out there is young and thinking about what they'd like to do in life and what would have meaning for them, working on how we can stall the environmental hazards that are coming from every direction at us, and the cancers and the health stresses, the breathing, the respiratory problems, the toxicity problems, the stress problems it's all causing us. I wish people would be thinking about these kinds of careers, these kinds of pathways as substantive, to have some meaning for them. And also to try to help animals who deserve every much. I hear so many times anti-environmentalists talk about the stupid people that would like to save deer over others, that would worry about deer versus our oil interests, or worry about caribou versus our oil interests, or would be tree huggers, that they care so much about trees versus our economic interest. Ladies and gentlemen, the natural world is the real world, is the true world, and it's the world we survive in. It's the world that is us. It's our blood and guts as much as anything on this planet. It's primary, it's fundamental. And to many people, it's self-evident that these things must be protected, maintained, and be held in sort of a sacred fashion, that they don't get destroyed, they don't get degraded and debased and just used up and abused as though they mean nothing, because they mean everything to us, and they are the world, and we love animals, and they have every right to be here as much as we, and we want everything to have its place and live. We don't. When you hear jargon about tree huggers and the screwballs that want to protect animals over economic interests or energy interests, etc., don't be fooled by that. It's self-evident that we are not the only creatures or the only life forms on this earth, and we certainly need as much vegetation as possible. We need trees, and we want the animals to persevere and be able to survive, just for the sake of that. This is the world as it really is. This is the true world. We are not, we can make ourselves into a road warrior kind of movie, if you recall that movie, of just dust and sand and war and grit and dirt and savagery. We can do that, but hopefully, as humans going for the nobler cause, the real dignified cause of our existence, we know enough to work with the environment and be part of it, not above it or beyond it or causing it to not exist. Now, I'll talk about a few things here too that have crossed my path as I have been passing time in recent days. One of them is, there's a new movie coming out. Maybe it already aired on television, might be a television movie, and it's supposed to reenact what happened on Flight 93. And Flight 93 is the flight that went down somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember, was it in Pennsylvania, or which is not the Midwest quite, or Ohio, somewhere in the middle, more in the middle section of the country. although Pennsylvania would be more east. And it's the one flight that crashed into the ground, into a field with a lot of people on it, and did not crash into a building like the Pentagon or the World, was it the World Trade Towers? My God, that were hit. And many people have said that it happened the same day as other events of 9/11. I think were there 5 hijacked planes in all on that day. And there are many theories about it. Some people feel that the plane was shot down. There are witnesses that say they saw jets flying in the area, and that the nature of how the plane went down seemed like an instant thing, and also the debris of how small it was and how far it spread all add up to kind of indicate that it may well have been shot down, and that might have happened for security purposes because having the potentially lethal plane coming into some building, say in Washington, D.C. possibly, or so on, would want to have been prevented and therefore shut down before it could reach a potential destination, in theory. So that's the Flight 93. And there was one person on it, Barbara Olson, who was a rigid and vehement spokesperson for the right and for policies similar to those that we see in the Bush administration in practice. She was on that plane that day. In fact, her husband is and was a lawyer with the Republican Party, a very noted one. I think he was a lawyer during the challenged elections for the race in 2000 when Al Gore and Bush were so close, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said to stop the vote or stop the counting of the vote. So anyway, that plane went down. It's called Flight 93. I guess it was number 93. And there were these stories that grew up of there being heroes on board. People used cell phones and called their loved ones and told them they were in a bind. And I guess it might have been mentioned on one of the cell phones to people outside the plane that they might try to take over the cockpit. I don't know if that literally is on any black box. I don't know if that was said to people who will verify that they were told that by whatever phone call they received. But this whole idea grew up that there were heroes that overtook the airplane and brought it down themselves, and that's where that favorite expression, "let's roll," came from. I think George Bush used it in one of his speeches thereafter, in the idea that these were such brave citizens. And I'd like to point out that there have been a lot of challenges to this idea of how things actually happen, and it's kind of something that fed upon itself and grew into a story, but whether this story is based in fact is really an unknown thing. And I remember, and it's funny that they're going to convey this as a true story, that they're going to, I don't know how the movie actually played out, but that people were heroes on board and that they, I guess, try to take over the cockpit and do very heroic things. But nothing is known about what the people really did or really tried to do. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention, because even after all these hero stories were floating around without there being really any information about it, a report came out later after people having analyzed what black box material they had, that for the last 3 minutes before the plane's crash, there's no sound on the black box, nothing that could be determined, and only seemingly perhaps was there some kind of a tussle, but other than that, nothing can be made out as to what really went on Flight 93. So it's very interesting that a sort of true kind of story about heroes has grown up and would be made into an account that people would take for granted, when in fact there may be there's apparently not very much evidence of what really did happen in those final minutes of that flight. And of course, with that, as with so many other things, there are so many theories and challenges to the official report of events of what actually did happen and why it happened and who was in control and how it could be possible that the events occurred the way they are stated to have occurred in the sort of common public opinion by now that has been formed through the media, etc. Okay, and it would be very useful to show people as heroes and to play on the terror threat. And it seems like the only thing we do have to play on these days is terror, terror, terror. Terror in the morning, terror in the evening, terror at supper time. We have, like I say, environment as the most critical problem, terror and war notwithstanding. What's happening at an alarming rate to us, headlong into complete catastrophe, is the most pressing problem that we face of any problem in the whole world, flus, epidemics, etc. But we certainly are getting a steady diet of terror, and in the elections to come in 2006 in the fall, much will be said, I'm sure, about terror for those on that side of the issue who wish to play it up and create fear. Not that there isn't terror, but who wish to make people shaking in their pants and not thinking logically about this and build up a blind fear and make people preclude to want to investigate and know much more about their purported enemies, find out very much more of who people are that are your reported opponents, what they want, what their history is, and what other ways could be used to get at the nature of the problem and the solution of the problem in a more civilized fashion, in a fashion that would use our brain and would use our negotiating and understanding skills to even work the problem psychologically and intelligently, even in a warlike way, even if we wanted to dupe and win, so to speak, over opponents in a competitive fashion. How to use our wits without having to be bombers and destroyers and fearmongers and making rabble-rousing effects of people just getting up in arms and ready to forget all the rules, forget about civil rights, forget about human rights, forget about civil liberties, forget about logic, forget about premeditation, and just go headlong into being crazy and wanting anything that's barbaric and devastating and nasty and preemptive and cursory and vulgar. In other words, stooping very low from our potential human position of dignity and courage and greater human purpose, that can remain guarded, that can remain vigilant, that can remain very careful to not be felled by its so-called enemies, and yet do things in a way more dignified, sophisticated, civilized fashion. Fear, we're going to keep on hearing much more about it. While we're on the subject of war, as it relates to terror and doing dastardly things in the name of fear and terror, doing them without knowing a whole hell of a lot of what the situation is about, except some little sound bites, little tidbits that you're being told to be scared that there's terror and that there's evil, and really not understanding what this evil is that you're talking about or you're scared about. I was thinking about how in the media you can see reports, and from personal experience hear reports cropping up bit by bit of veterans and active personnel in the military having served in Iraq, coming back to the United States or wherever, and starting to display the same syndrome that we saw after Vietnam. The same problems of being changed individuals. We've already had examples of shooting, suicide, those climbing up, tons of divorce. Just the separation would be enough for divorce when people have to be gone a year at a time or more, and then they have to do that repeatedly. I think some people have served as many as 3 tours of duty, or can serve as many as that. And being changed people, more and more stories coming at a personal level and through the media here and there, not as any big thing for people to pay attention to. You have to read between the lines to find them, of people who become forever changed, and that horrible affliction which we've heard spoken about so very much, at least the label, creeping up in greater numbers as the guys and girls from Iraq come home. And that's or even stay in Iraq, the post-traumatic stress disorder, where the stress of killing, seeing people killed, as one put it, looking them right in the eye and killing them, is too much to take. And being in situations where you feel not protected enough, wide open, not knowing what lot would befall you, and having to be ever, ever vigilant, which is the real precursor of post-traumatic stress disorder, where you can never, ever let your guard down, ever, will be the beginning makings of post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of people coming back, they may swallow their sentiments, they may keep them inside, but you can hear reports that they're not jovial, that they're not involved, they don't just sit around relaxedly anymore. They stay to the side. I heard of one guy, a friend of mine's friend, returned from Iraq and actually went to live in the backwoods of Tennessee, where he lives alone as a hermit, because he doesn't want to walk around in society knowing the things that he knows and has seen that other people haven't seen. He can't bear to resume being part of a so-called different, normal society. You become forever changed once you step over to the dark side. How can you ever erase that? The dark side exists. The dark side is a reality that you experience, and you see it for real, and it can never be erased. And many people cannot carry on productively after having this inside of them. No way for it to go away. And even persons who do carry on, as in the post-Vietnam veterans, to be sure, they don't sleep well at night. They worry. They have inside of them something that they have to keep closed. And that something is a force that remains in them, a dynamic force as part of their personality, something they have to deal with that lays latent forevermore underneath them. They have to struggle with that, even when they maintain and survive and go about a productive, so to speak, life. I just talked with a young girl, it was somewhat shocking to me, who had been to Iraq. She was helping me in a private, personal capacity as part of her job, and she was about 24 years old, very nice person. And we were going about our business, and she's chatting with me, and she said she just got back from Iraq after 14 months in Iraq, and she had a child here in the United States. I was like, whoa, wow, what a fact to lay on me. So I was asking her about it, and she was a Marine to boot, and she would tell me some things about her experiences in northern Iraq, which were pretty horrific, and sort of in the Kurdish areas where the oil is, and that's sort of the more peaceful, less a horrible area of Iraq, and they were pretty bad. And then when we started to talk about Fallujah, which she had been to, she really couldn't go on. And she kept saying, because her family came from a heritage of Marine Corps enlistees personnel, and I'm sure they talked a lot about being in the Marines together and so on. She kept saying at every pause in her conversation with me, no regrets. Oh, she kept, we're going to have a telephone call in 1 second. She kept saying no regrets, but yet couldn't speak about what she had been involved in when she got to a certain point. And let us take this phone call. Thank you, caller.
Hello, Nancy. How are you?
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
All right. I have a question.
Yes.
And it's based on the DSS system. I was reading this morning about this young girl who was killed in DSS custody. And then they were talking about the different young people that have been taken out of their homes and put into foster homes and you know, having to be murdered, basically, in these homes. So
I'm not hearing all of your phone call. I'm hearing it so very low in here. Maybe we could get the volume up. I'm missing some of it. You're telling me about the girl who was taken out of her
home.
Yes.
And then found dead, and she was raped and so forth by the.
It is now, Barbara. It's okay now. They raised it.
Okay.
Yes.
She was raped by her the foster father and so forth, and also the foster son, the son of the home as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of abuse happening in there as well for her. And then they talked about another 4-year-old that was killed and so forth. So I want to find out what can we do for the DSS? How can we ensure that people who say that they are foster moms or dads are truly people of character and who will help and not hurt the children?
Great question. I was thinking about the DSS situation too. I've heard about these recent cases and the one girl who's in the hospital in a coma, I believe. And unfortunately, I mean, a lot of great people out there who have done marvelous things with foster children and then adopted them, in fact, might take offense at this, but a lot of times that people get foster children, it's an economic proposition because they do come with a monthly stipend and so on. So sometimes people are in business of having foster children. So there is that happening out there. And we also know that the caseload for the DSS workers, on the other hand, is way too great for the amount of things that they have to investigate. So that's another problem. And I guess the really horrible problem at root is that DSS, not that money is the cure-all, but DSS does not get the funds it needs to really check things out and be more sure about who they're giving children to and what's happening to the children that they give things to. I sense that it's an agency that's overworked, underpaid. You know that human services pay very lowly, and DSS probably pays very lowly. So these could be problems, and it's not going to change. We're not going to be, realistically, I can't foresee any way, shape, or form that we would be putting money towards making a more sound DSS system. I don't see that in the mix whatsoever in the foreseeable future whatsoever. We don't have much going towards mental health in general. We don't have much going towards taking care of children that don't have proper parents. So I think it's going to continue the way it is. maybe there will be some shakedown where the workers who do work for DSS will get, you know, informed and sort of pressured to be way more careful, and they might add more questions and more events and schedules that have to happen in overseeing the foster children. They may shift around how many cases a particular worker can have, but these will all not even be Band-Aids. The problem is just going to continue, and foster children are often in circumstances where they're just an economic commodity for the situation that they're in. And that's not to malign all the wonderful people that do foster work and care a lot about the children. So without, you know, a lot of resources being put into caring for the children, I really feel that we ought to have, not just for children who are taken away from their parents or don't have parents, but also for parents who feel they're stressed and they can't handle the children and they yell at them. I think we should have public service campaigns, public information campaigns to say, look, if you can't handle the kid and you feel like smacking him, or it gets on your nerves, or you need a rest, because many parents, single parents especially out there, are feeling that way. And we have another call, and I will take it. I'll just finish this thought. I really feel for all these children, we should have public places that they can go to that are wonderful with computers. We ought to be putting money into sort of what Israel has done with kibbutz. I don't know if they still do it, where you set up situations to raise your children. The state helps to raise the children with maximal benefit in organized kinds of ways that are set up for children to come, to be able to be taken care of and reared properly, and get some of the environment and learning and nurturing needs that they need. Sort of, we need to do this as a society for all of our kids that need it, all of our kids. I would say more. Let's take the call. Thank you. Hi, caller. Thanks.
Yes, hi. How you doing, Nancy?
I'm good.
My question was more about post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
I grew up in an environment where it was pretty abusive, and I kind of, I guess, adopted these chameleon-like personalities where I can't kind of turn off. So I'm stuck with, like, I wouldn't say multiple personalities. I would say more of they kind of come and go depending on which people I'm around, environment I'm around. And I was wondering, I've been through therapy and medications. Right now I'm currently on Paxil for depression. But it doesn't seem like it's working. Is there anything I could do myself?
What exactly is the problem you're trying to get out of when you say, are you trying to get out of depression? Are you trying to get out of being a different person than you really are?
Well, more both actually. Because what I'm trying to do is stop myself from being someone different, like with every single environment I kind of step into, and also kind of combat the depression myself.
Mm-hmm. And you used to change your personality or your way of being because you would try to be stopping abuse by doing that?
Not really stopping abuse, but kind of knowing what the people would want, like my parents, or knowing what type of personality they would want when they come into the house. So I know, all right, I shouldn't be hyper, I should be nice, or maybe they would want an intellectual kid to talk to at the time, or I guess whatever. So I kind of learned how to be different people, and then that kind of just stuck with me throughout life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. That's a very difficult place to be in. So you never knew what to expect from your parents. Would that be fair to say?
Right.
And sometimes they might be nice to you, and sometimes they might be nasty.
Right.
So they brought you up with no firm basis, no grounding of where to step and how to feel self-assured and sure that you can, you know, be whatever way you're going to be. So you were on guard trying to be what you thought would would be the best way to be for the situation.
Right. And the problem is that throughout life it kind of stuck with me that way. So I would kind of become this person in different social groups to, I guess, fit in more.
Yeah,
So,
what kind of person might you become?
depending on the environment. So if I was in like a neighborhood where it was kind of violent, I would become violent. If I was in a neighborhood where I guess people were nice and it was more intellectual, I'd become intellectual. Or if I was like, well, right now I'm more of a more sexual now. It's kind of because I guess the environment I am in now is more a sexual atmosphere as far because I'm older now, so it's more like women and men going against each other. So it's like I don't know. It's like it's kind of weird. I can't really explain it, I guess.
I can sort of understand it's very deep and difficult what you're talking about. It's not something that lends itself to a one second answer. But which of these do you want to be? What's really you?
Intellectual.
I
Definitely.
see. So then why are you putting yourself in violence or sexuality just for the sake of sexuality?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Why do you not try to put yourself or be, no matter who the people are around you, because now what can happen to you now? Would somebody punch you in the face, or would they disrespect? What do you have to fear from people to not be yourself now?
Not liking me or realizing that I'm kind of a calm person and someone trying to prey upon that.
Ah, you don't want them to get advantage of you. How can you be preyed upon? What could they do to you?
See me for who I really am and then decide that I'm not a tough guy and I guess feel as though they can just kind of pick on me and have me go, well, I guess pick is a small word, but I wouldn't want to have to kind of go back and retaliate. So I played many parts, so I just kind of...
Why do you not want to retaliate? I don't believe in retaliating, but why do you not want to retaliate?
One, I wouldn't want to go to jail, and I definitely wouldn't want to hurt anyone.
So sometimes you feel like you might want to retaliate. So in other words, as a defense, you don't want to have to get nasty with people. So you want to be what they think you should be, so you don't get in... am I saying this correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this is not something that can be spoken of in a soundbite. You have some very deep, difficult problem. Very deep, difficult problem. But I would say to you, first of all, to know that living life is a huge struggle and a challenge, number one. Okay, so it isn't easy. It's really, really hard. And some of us, many of us, myself included, are born with difficulties inside themselves to overcome.
Yeah.
Not just get a job, a car, and all that, but a lot of stuff from the get-go right inside yourself that you have to struggle through. So, first of all, know that it's very hard. And secondly, just maybe realize that try to be who you are, and this will in no way, really solve your problem, but I'll try the best I can. Try to be really who you are, and if people don't like who you are and they try to take advantage of you, just know that people taking advantage of people is the way of the world, okay? It's like primary of how the world works. So it shouldn't come as any surprise to you, and you don't have to be trying to retaliate because somebody tries to take advantage of you. All you have to do is say, well, I thought I could trust that person. I thought I'd be in with these people, but I'm not. Let me see what else I could do. There's no reason for you to have to try to go and retaliate to somebody just because they do you wrong.
Right.
People doing people wrong is the way of the world. So unfortunately, besides all these inner problems that you have, you're dealing in a world that's dog-eat-dog, and that is going to prey on vulnerabilities.
Right.
So you be who you are And if you really are who you are, and if you feel that people are taking advantage of you and disrespecting you, you don't go back for more to those people. You just move on, and you will find your stride in life. Do you have a job?
Not at the current moment.
How old are you?
I'm 25.
Why do you not have a job?
Well, got arrested a few months ago. I was currently going to school to be an EMT, and I was arrested for mistaken identity. So what happened?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what happened was I served a month in jail, and that kind of stopped me, I guess, from doing anything, especially getting a job, because now that's on my record until the case is closed, which I'm going to trial for.
How long will that be?
Well, February 14th is when I go back.
And then you feel it might be taken off your record?
Oh, definitely.
So then you ought to be searching out where you're going to get a job already. Maybe you don't want to approach the people yet, but you want to be thinking about, first of all, you want to get a job. You want to keep yourself occupied.
Yeah.
At whatever. And you want to try to practice to be who you are. And if some babe, some chick doesn't like it, if some hoodlum doesn't like it, if they want to, take advantage of you, move on. Move on. If they don't like the way you really are. By the way, you sound pretty intellectual. You are very well spoken.
Thank you.
You are very well spoken. You can articulate your situation very well. And I think you're quite rooted in reality. I mean, I could be wrong. This is way too quick a forum to know much about you. But I don't think you're way off the deep end, so I don't think you're misreading. It's emotional.
Yes.
It's emotional. So you're struggling with emotion. Be yourself. Keep yourself occupied. Don't forget about retaliation. People are going to try to fell you left and right. If you go for any kind of justice, as you are right now, don't do it to get even.
Right.
Do it because it's necessary. Because it's necessary to clear your record. It's necessary to, settle. You make sure something's understood. But don't do it. Don't do it to get back at people. And try to leave yourself a little bit open. And don't be frightened that people are not going to be kind and gentle, unfortunately. And don't hope too much, but be yourself. By all means, be yourself. And be as smart and go as far as you can go. Go as far as you can go. And I have to stop here. That was a wonderful call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Nancy.
Thank you. That was a wonderful call to end the show. And I hope more people call in with any questions, anytime. We'll be here 2 weeks. No, we'll be here, I think, next week, the first Monday of every month. We'll be here next week live, 2 p.m. Here's looking at you.
You just go right up there because it's here and it's now. Just move every bone to a cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.